CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen. Our top stories: Europe's largest tech firm paints a rosy outlook for the year ahead. On the back of its 2022 results, we'll have the latest on the Dutch chip maker ASML. Our other headlines: after days of pressure from NATO allies, Germany says it'll supply 14 of its Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. Kyiv has welcomed the move as a first step. Frozen out of Teams, Microsoft says it's reversed a network change that saw tens of thousands of users around the world unable to access its services. And they've become the star attraction. Two giant pandas from China bring a little animal magic to Madrid Zoo. Well, it's chips with everything, it seems. Europe's largest technology company has posted its 2022 results, and it's looking broadly encouraging for ASML, the Dutch maker of semiconductor chips. Our correspondent, Naweed Jabarkal, has been following their story. Naweed.
Thank you, Jamie. ASML reported $23 billion in net sales in 2022. That's a fairly strong showing, despite major challenges and a slowdown in demand for semiconductor chips, partly because demand fell in China, where COVID-19 lockdowns had an impact. Net income in the period was at $6 billion for Europe's largest tech firm by market capitalization, which now stands at around $270 billion US. Crucially, it says it's expecting 2023 to be a lot stronger. ASML says it has a record order backlog of more than $43 billion and is expecting sales to be up by a quarter. Despite that optimism, though, the firm's CEO said the immediate outlook remains, quote, uncertain. There are a lot of issues. High inflation and interest rates are hurting businesses and consumers in many parts of the world. There's also a slowdown in global growth that's weighing on the sector. And then the bigger long-term worry for the industry, that's the growing rivalry between the US and China over advanced technology and chips in particular, which has accelerated in recent months. In October, the Biden administration brought in new controls to limit the exports of critical technology to China, and that includes semiconductors. Japan and the Netherlands, where ASML is based, are reportedly set to join the US in adopting the bans. Professor Liu Bao-chung is from the University of International Business and Economics in Beijing. I asked him about the pressure facing firms like ASML.
I think the Dutch government is really in a very strong predicament. And number one, they are ready to cave in to the U.S. pressure, which is really a shame because the sovereign independence is something that each nation will have to uphold. And the other is that the ASML as a company is going to suffer a great deal because the 15% of their revenue is really derived from exporting to China. And China is now the largest market to import the related industries with the integrated circuits sector. So once this is really, taking a reality, they're going to lose a big market. And also, once the market is closed for a particular company, it's going to be very difficult for them to really to have a turnaround.
Let's look at the rationale for this ban and export controls. The US says they'll be used, the technology, for military purposes. Can China alleviate those concerns?
Well, today, technologies as such has, almost universal applications for civil use, for military use, and for exploration of aerospace, etc. So it is very difficult to identify the dual use or multi-use purposes for such technology such as chips. So for China to enhance its national defense industry, to preserve its national security, I think it's very legitimate as the second world largest economy and with the largest population. And there is no strong evidence that China is really disrupting the world with its weapons, with its military might.
So these companies might lose out, but let's look at the other side. China trying to become self-sufficient in chip making, but at the moment it uses buys most of the world's chips, uses them, but it only produces about 15% of global production. How long will it take, do you think, given these export controls, for China to really be able to compete?
China, over the past experience has proven that they have the right capability, one way or the other. They can really find alternative routes, or they can really go head on for competition. So, give China another 5 years, I could see that we are going to be very close to the front edge of such sort of technology. So it does mean that China is going to spend a lot more efforts, a lot more resources over there. And this is really a sort of distortion of the free global trade actually taught by the United States and taught by the European Union.
As the world becomes more high-tech and more digital, the need for these chips is only set to grow. And for both the US and China, the stakes are high. The Americans have seen their share of global production fall from around 40% in 1990 to nearly 10% 3 decades later. And for China, having to play catch-up could be costly, with much of the intellectual property around semiconductors outside its borders, meaning this niche industry could be even more important in the years to come. Jamie.
Germany has confirmed that after weeks of negotiation with NATO allies, it's to send tanks to Ukraine. Kyiv says tanks are vital in its battle against Russian troops and has welcomed the move in what it called a first step. Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz said 14 Leopard 2 tanks are to be sent to Ukraine. The move also means that other allied countries could now follow suit. Spain, Norway and the Netherlands have said they could join Poland in committing their supplies of their own Leopard 2s. Our correspondent Trent Murray reports now from Berlin.
Well, it means that in many ways the German Chancellor has heard that call from Kyiv that they have been putting out for months to send some of these modern battle tanks to the conflict zone. Chancellor Olaf Scholz speaking in the Bundestag today, officially confirming what many of us had expected based on earlier media reports, that Germany, after months of international pressure, would be sending some of those Leopard 2s to Ukraine. These 14 will come from the German army's own supplies, and there will be training taking place here in Germany for those Ukrainian troops that will operate that system. But perhaps more significantly is the fact that it also signals that Berlin is ready to give the green light to those other European countries, that coalition, if you will, to send in some of their own Leopard 2s. It's worth remembering, because this is a German manufactured tank, Berlin effectively gets a veto over any other nation exporting it or selling it on, and Berlin has said it may exercise that veto in the past, but it seems that it is not going to do that as much now. Poland has already said it will be sending 14 of its own, and even as far as Portugal now, there are conversations happening that some of theirs may be sent. So this in many ways will be a shot in the arm for the Ukrainians. They hope it will give them the real boost that they need to take on the Russians, particularly in the east. But it is also a huge day for Germany, given how long German Chancellor Olaf Scholz resisted pressure and hoped that he could avoid this course of action. It seems that after almost 12 months of this war, he has realised that that's no longer possible. Let's have a listen to what he told fellow lawmakers.
In everything we do, we must always make it very clear that we are doing what is necessary and what is possible to support Ukraine, but that at the same time we are preventing the war from escalating into a war between Russia and NATO, and we will always continue to observe this principle.
Trent, I guess it's an impossible question to answer, really, but I mean, how far could this delivery of these tanks change the course of the war in Ukraine?
Well, what we know is that both European and US defence officials have been saying that they expect as spring arrives and the weather warms up that the fighting will heat up as well, and that there'll be intense clashes, particularly in the east of Ukraine, with both Russia planning major offensives, but also Ukraine wanting to go on the counter-offensives as well. And these modern battle tanks, in many ways, are superior to a lot of the Russian Soviet-era stock, like the T-62. That is being used, and so it is hoped from the Ukrainian side that having some of these German manufactured tanks on their side of this fight, that they will be able to get a superior arms, effectively superior firepower, if you will, as well. We also, it's worth noting, know that the UK is sending some of its own tanks. France is discussing it. Possible announcements from the US. It will be logistically challenging for the Ukrainians to have 4 separate tanks, but nevertheless, they believe it could give them, as I say, a real shot in the arm to take on the Russians. But we will, of course, just have to wait and see how it all plays out. Trying to get these tanks into Ukraine won't be easy, but nevertheless, President Zelensky, who turns 45 today, is already celebrating this as a major birthday gift for him and his nation.
Well, Moscow has warned that Western tanks will burn if they arrive in Ukraine. The Kremlin says tanks from Germany, the United States and other allied countries will be destroyed on the battlefield, describing the decision to send them as provocation. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Stuart Smith, watching events in Moscow. Stuart, Moscow quick to condemn the decision to send tanks.
Yeah, that's right. The Kremlin's always expressed frustration and anger when Western weaponry is sent to support Ukraine, but particularly this time with the expected delivery not just of German tanks now, but other nations as well. The Kremlin is particularly irate. Russia's embassy in Berlin says that this is an extremely dangerous move and suggests it contradicts Berlin's statements about not wanting to get involved in what Russia calls the special military operation. The ambassador in Berlin also hinted that he's linking this to a failure of Germany to come to terms with its Nazi history, saying that this is Germany refusing to recognize its historical responsibility and opening up a new front in Eastern Europe. So that's how the embassy reacted. But the Kremlin is also keen to try to reassure people in Russia that it won't make any difference to the ultimate outcome of the special military operation, saying indeed that tanks will burn, that the Russian soldiers will be harmed, but so will Ukrainian civilians, but the ultimate aims will be unchanged. Now, with anger coming from Moscow, there was also a warning at arms control talks in Vienna on Wednesday from the Russian representatives there. They say that if these tanks are supplied with ammunition that contains a uranium core, as some anti-armor piercing ammunition does, they say that would be tantamount to detonating a dirty bomb in Ukraine, and Russia would respond to that accordingly.
Stuart, thank you for that. Our correspondent Stuart Smith in Moscow. Well, Ukraine has announced more anti-corruption measures as the number of officials quitting their posts rises. 15 senior government figures have now either resigned or been sacked amid claims of bribery or wrongdoing. Ukraine's Prime Minister says the country must build what he calls an anti-corruption edifice as part of its fight against Russia and its pursuit of further integration with Europe. The British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says he was unaware of any conflict of interest when he appointed Nadhim Zahawi to be chairman of the ruling Conservative Party. Zahawi has been facing calls to resign after it emerged that he'd been under investigation for his private tax affairs. He paid a tax penalty when he was finance minister. Sunak has asked his ethics advisor to examine the case. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, we're live in New York next, talking tech as Google faces a second antitrust lawsuit from the US Justice Department.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos and unicorn companies. Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliette Mann.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. Europe's largest tech firm, the Dutch chip maker ASML, paints a rather rosy outlook for the year ahead on the back of its 2022 results. Our other headlines: after days of pressure from NATO allies, Germany says it will supply 14 of its Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. Kyiv has welcomed the announcement as a first step. Well, not a particularly good day for American tech giants. Microsoft reports the slowest growth in revenue since 2016, plus a server outage has affected tens of thousands of users all around the world. Meanwhile, Google faces a second antitrust lawsuit from the US Justice Department. Let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett in New York. John, so Microsoft under the spotlight. Tell us more.
Never a dull moment here on Wall Street. You should know that by now. And yeah, it's funny how these things are always teed up because they give their earnings every 3 months, as you know. But this time round, it's been teed up here as Microsoft being the most important of all the US corporations, you know, the real golden boy that we've been waiting to hear from. And when we heard from them last night, it was okay. Could have been better, could have been worse. Basically, as you know, we're in the middle of fourth quarter earnings season, and 66% of the S&P 500 have beaten Wall Street expectations so far. So that's good. However, it's not all good because overall these companies' earnings are down about 5% on where they have been in recent history. And Morgan Stanley, which is the big bank, one of the big banks here, warning that actually Wall Street hasn't got hold of the right end of the stick just yet. You saw them rallying as far as the Dow is concerned on Friday, Monday and Tuesday. And Morgan Stanley says, look, really, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that you guys haven't worked out yet. Wall Street, in other words, has got it wrong, according to Morgan Stanley. Anyway, Microsoft then giving us its earnings about, well, this is getting on for 24 hours ago now. And earnings per share was a beat. $2.32, not $2.29, so that's good. Revenue was a miss, $52.75 billion, not $52.94. And Azure, which is the very important division of the cloud over at Microsoft, it grew, beating Wall Street expectations. It grew 31%. But when I looked this morning, I realized that's quite a lot lower, in fact, substantially lower than it has been. So the shares are being punished right now. They were up 5% when the news first came out. They're now down 3%. The problem is Windows and Office. Sales have been dropping off in 2022. And then on top of that, the management is seeking growth in the first quarter of the year, that's January through March, of just about $51 billion. Wall Street been looking for $52 billion. It's going to cost them $1.2 billion to lay off all those 10,000 software engineers that we talked about last week. They're still trying to buy the gaming company Activision Blizzard, and the government here is still trying to block them. And as you say, Jamie, there was a massive worldwide outage today affecting things like Teams, which is their version of Zoom, and SharePoint. Now, they're working on it. I think it's back up now, but it was out right around the world for quite a long time this morning. And I've just realized that's why I can't get onto my work emails. That'll be it. I wondered why that was. I was going to phone the news desk and blast them. But in fact, I think it's this issue, to be honest with you. One bit of good news, they're investing another $10 billion in the AI company called OpenAI. And they produce a thing called ChatGPT, which allows you to have a conversational conversation with a computer. Microsoft has invested there before in 2009, 2021, and now another $10 billion going in to try and bring forward what is the new buzzword on Wall Street, which is AI, artificial intelligence. Jamie.
Spare a thought for all those staff around the world devastated not to participate in yet another thrilling Teams meeting. OK, well, let's park Microsoft and talk about Google, targeted by the authorities again.
Yes, now, this is complicated, but I will, as ever, do my very best to bring it down to the simplest possible explanation. Basically, the Department of Justice and 8 of the states here, including New York and Connecticut and New Jersey, where I live, are going after Google again. This is the second time. Now, this time round, they're suing Google and Alphabet for their digital advertising system. They call it an antitrust monopoly that crushes competition for rival search engines like Bing and Yahoo, and I assume even China's Baidu. I assume that's the case. Anyway, what are they doing? Well, it is a bit complicated, but here we go. In the simplest form, if you tap into Google something like that you want to see, like just, for example, classic cars or classic aeroplanes or something like that, you don't see this, but behind the scenes there is an instantaneous auction that goes on, organized by Google, asking all the advertisers out there, would they like to advertise on a page requested by John for classic cars? And the advertisers say, oh, yes, I want me. And Google allows them in to advertise on my page. Now, of course, for my page, the amount that they pay to get in is just minuscule because it's just me. But overall, the millions of ads, you can see how this adds up. And the Department of Justice is saying, look, the thing is, you bought this company that does this in 2008, and basically you're creating a massive monopoly, keeping other people who would like to advertise out of the space and forcing them to use your own Google tools. That's basically it. Now, the Department of Justice is seeking a trial by jury for this, so we'll see what happens there. And in the meantime, Alphabet Google says, look, do you mind leaving us alone? Please, we're a big company. We do some great things. Could you get off our back? And what they actually said was, this is an attempt to pick winners and losers in the highly competitive advertising technology sector. You won't hear another thing about this now for months on end, folks. Eventually, it'll come to court in some form. Nothing's going to change on your screens, though.
John, good to see you. Thanks for that. Our correspondent John Terrett in New York. Twin giant pandas from China have become a star attraction at Madrid Zoo. Now with Lunar New Year celebrations in full swing, the pair have been celebrating with a little animal magic. Our correspondent Ken Brown reports.
Twins Yo-Yo and Jojo are still the star attractions at Madrid Zoo. When they were born back in September 2021, they weighed just 150 grams. In a year and a half, they will grow to a combined weight of over 300 kilos. That's what happens when you eat this much bamboo. The carers here at Madrid Zoo are very happy with the progress of their two celebrities.
Fantastic. They are now 50 kilograms of weight. They were born with 150 grams. And they are very teeny and very weak, but they have been growing and growing and growing, active and fantastic.
Proud parents, mother Hua Zueba and father Bing Xing have been at the zoo for over 14 years. The twins' growth is monitored with the help of experts at the Chengdu Research Center for Giant Pandas. The Chinese giant panda is no longer on the endangered list, but is still vulnerable according to the World Wildlife Fund. There are over 2,000 in the wild now, and their path to recovery has been helped by the conservation and expansion of the bamboo forests where they thrive. An adult panda can eat as much as 50 kilos of bamboo every day. These animals have a big appetite. In just over a year and a half, the pandas will be fully grown. It is hoped that they will return to China and they, or possibly their children, will be reintroduced back into the wild. Spanish zookeepers have also had the opportunity to visit China and see the conservation efforts firsthand.
I was in China, in Chengdu Panda Base. I think it was the most amazing experience in my life. So I think for me it was amazing to discover that my job here in Madrid have mean in China with the pandas, because I think the future of the pandas is well in China, with all the effort that the Chinese keepers and Chinese government is doing for pandas.
Yo-Yo and Jojo are a symbol of a successful relationship between Spain and China. 2023 marks 50 years of official diplomatic relations between the two nations. And with Chinese New Year celebrations beginning, the pandas here in Madrid might even get their favorite treat, a bamboo cake. Ken Brown, CGTN, Madrid.
All flights at Berlin's international airport have been cancelled as ground and security staff stage a one-day strike. The stoppage comes amid a dispute over pay, with the union saying a proposed wage increase is lower than the rate of inflation. Nearly 35,000 passengers were scheduled to use the airport on Wednesday. Amazon workers in the UK are staging their first ever strike in the country over pay. Around 300 staff are taking part after they were offered a 60-cent rise in their hourly wage, taking the total to just over $14. Staff who've complained about working conditions that include timed toilet breaks are seeking an hourly wage of over $18. An Australian-based startup has made an initial bid to buy the collapsed UK battery company British Bolt. The move by Recharge Industries could revive plans to construct a large plant in the north of England. British Bolt, which had hoped to take advantage of increased electric vehicle demand in the UK, went into administration last week. Britain's largest airline, EasyJet, is reporting strong demand for summer holidays despite the cost of living crisis. The company says it expects to beat the market expectations in 2023, seeing a more than 160% increase in customers year on year. That news pulled up aviation share prices in the UK markets. Labour Party leader Chris Hipkins has been sworn in as New Zealand's new Prime Minister. Speaking after his first cabinet meeting, Hipkins says his government will try to help low and middle-income families as the country faces rising living costs. Hipkins replaces Jacinda Ardern, who announced her surprise resignation last week. The headlines again. Europe's largest tech firm, the Dutch chip maker ASML, paints a rosy outlook for the year ahead on the back of its 2022 results. Our other headlines: after days of pressure from NATO allies, Germany says it will supply 14 of its Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. Kyiv has welcomed the announcement as a first step. Frozen out of Teams, Microsoft says it's reversed a network change that saw tens of thousands of users all around the world unable to access its services. And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching. More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. We're on smart TV apps: Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.